Hello and welcome to another build guide, and today I'm going to be showcasing my trap Huntress character that I've been working on. I'm just gonna start out by saying that this is more of a meme character. It's not very powerful in that regard of, let's say you want to do very hard content, like let's say you want to push a character to Rev 50 or something like that, like Rev 50 plus. Um, but what I feel like is a good character is when you can do Wrath 10 and actually complete the Great Forge at Rev 10. That's usually what I would say is a great build. And also, this build is very fun to play, so I think that checks out the boxes for a great character. I will say as well that I didn't invest too heavily into it, so you could push it further if you wanted to. Um, but I think I have other plans that I want to play. For example, I want to play a melee character on the Huntress, where I use stab and finesse. But that's for another video. But let's begin. So, first of all, the Reaper. This Reaper is very good when it comes to stuns. And the whole idea of traps is that they can stun enemies for 3 seconds. And that's like a guaranteed effect. So that paired with this Reaper right here is very, very powerful. So first of all, against stunned enemies, you deal 175% increased damage. That's a multiplier. And on top of that, you can get another 175% increased damage against enemies hit from the back. Plus you get some crit chance and ancestral strike chance. So overall, if you have the right conditions, you can deal a massive amount of increased damage on a single target. But this Reaper has a weakness, and that weakness is, for example, the siege leader in the Great Forge. You cannot really stun him because he is pretty much stun immune, I think. The only stun that you can put on him is the upheaval skill itself, where it says you stun the next enemies for the next 2 seconds if they are not stunned. So that's the only way you can actually stun him. So I think the Reaper is cool, but it falls short when it comes to consistency with like bosses. I think everything else in the game gets stunned, and you can pretty much stun lock them, so it's a pretty safe build in that regard. So overall, the Reaper is cool, but not the best. I feel like you can, let's say, slap on the Big Fury and then you can perform way better because it's just so much more powerful. So another thing is the Primordial Benediction. It's alright, because if you hit the enemy with a small hit, you only deal 30% of that small hit every second, instead of, let's say, you could deal 10 million and then you could like deal 3 million every second, but that doesn't happen every time. So the Reaper itself is cool, but not awesome, you know. And the upheaval ability itself is very, very underwhelming. It doesn't really perform that well compared to just traps in general. Traps deal quite a lot of damage. They have 200% skill damage, and you can increase that even further with something like this trap network, where your traps deal 20% increased damage per nearby trap. So, let's go over the runes. The runes are actually very impactful on this character, because it does two very important things. First, it makes us able to spawn totems that shoot out arrow shot. And first of all, that's great because you can get leech from arrow shot. On top of that, you can get a node called tracking arrow. So when you hit an enemy with arrow shot, they become tracked, and traps deal 100% increased damage to tracked enemies. That's also a multiplier, so that means instead of your traps being 200% base damage, it's pretty much like 400 instead. And then it already outperforms the upheaval ability on this Reaper, which is 400%. Because traps are an area of effect skill. And you can scale area of effect skills with area of effect, which means pretty much increased damage, which is also a multiplicative modifier. So yeah, the ability itself we pretty much ignored completely, which is a shame. I wish it was better, but it's not. So yeah, we're using the Rune of the Shaman to spawn totems, and the easiest way for us to spawn those and have a pretty high uptime on it is through Adriana activation rune. So after we've cast 3 support skills, we summon the totem. And that is very often we do that. When you have 12 Serenity stacks, you suddenly spam it constantly. And then you have pretty much 100% uptime on a arrow shot totem that shoots arrows everywhere on the screen. And then it tracks them, so they take increased trap damage. And on top of that, they can also, through this node right here, spawn traps on a critical strike. It only has 10%, which is kind of a shame. I wish it was like 20%. But 10% is still pretty massive on big packs of enemies. So it's actually very good at clearing things. And then for the enhancement rune, we're using the Begarth. I'm not sure how you pronounce that name. So let's say you take the Great Forge and you spam your support skill, you suddenly stack this effectiveness up to 150%. What does the effectiveness do of the rune? It simply just adds more arrows to your totems, which is great. You get all the way up to 20 arrows, which is very powerful and very condensed in the area that you can hit enemies. And it essentially just boosts your clear speed to the moon with this node. So that's a very great combination right here. And of course for the ultimatum, I'm just using flawless power. I feel like after they nerfed crit damage modifiers on gear, the flawless power is just such a nice one to take now. It gives so much damage for pretty much not investing anything into your character. And then you can focus on other stats like, let's say, area size, area of effect, which is essentially better because it just increases your damage and overall clear speed. I think that's a way better trade-off than investing crit damage on gear. Personally, at least. Okay, let's go over skills. I think that's a very important topic right now. So we are taking Architect of Death, Turret Syndrome, and you're probably wondering how can you not spawn totems, or at least the turrets, ballista turrets. Let's skip right to the end here, and that's this one node right here, Trap Syndrome. So whenever you cast the Turret Syndrome, you lay down a trap instead of a portable ballista. Plus you get a 50% cooldown reduction, which is great. So this is the reason why we can spawn traps instead of a portable ballista. And yeah, this is pretty much the whole build idea after they changed this node right here. I'm not sure what the previous node was, honestly. Probably not that impactful. But yeah, let's start from the beginning. We are taking the greedy Huntress just to get a bit of Goldus find. I don't think anything else matters. Next node, engulfing power for the area size. This scales our area of effect on traps. Next is just totems of renewal. We get 3% max life for each active totem currently under your control. This is at most 1, maybe 2 for a split second. So it's just a node for 3% max life. I think the other 2 are pretty useless. Next is very important. Seasoned Hunter makes the traps activate instantly. So that means when you place it, it's already armed and ready, so you can just instantly place it under enemies and it explodes immediately. That's great. It feels very powerful to have this, and that's pretty much the reason we gotta go with this specialization as well. Because I had some other plans in mind where I could use the support Reaper, but it doesn't work with the trap itself, which is a shame in my opinion. Trap network makes you able to stack up a lot of increased damage against nearby enemies that are close to your traps. Like if you have 5 traps, you suddenly get 100% increased trap damage, which is great. Next point is very important. If you don't take this, it's gonna feel very awful. Whenever you cast Third Syndrome, its cooldown is reduced by 7 seconds for each stack of Serenity. But we don't have totems, so this is considered like the trap. Like let's say it like this. When you cast Ballistas, it's just replaced with a trap, essentially. So it's still the same skill that you're casting. So we get this buff for this node right here, where it says its cooldown time is reduced by 7% for each stack of Serenity stack. This goes up to 12, so that means I'm pretty sure it's 84% cooldown reduction, which is great. And then paired with this one, it suddenly becomes a very fast skill actually. You can see I'm placing traps pretty fast, at a rapid pace at least. So that's great. Next is speed, violence, and momentum for PS4 rebound. We use that for arrow shot. And then, of course, the trap syndrome. Let's go over arrow shot. We take bouncing arrow for the rebound. We also scale a bit on gear, where we have, I think it's a bit over 50% just to get 100% rebound. We take this one, tracking arrow, which is very important. One downside to being like you are pretty much forced to taking this if you want a lot of damage is that you lose this node right here, Obsidian Arrowhead, which is kind of a shame because 100% chance to pierce for free on a single upgrade is great, right? But we have to take this. So we have to scale a bit of pierce chance on our gear and in attributes, sadly. But because we're using totems, we can get a whopping 40% critical strike chance. And the critical strike chance helps us trigger this node right here, where you can place traps under enemies with a 10% chance. That's great. Next, so many arrows. You get 3 additional arrows. That works on the totems as well. So we can potentially get up to 23 arrows, which is very powerful. And the next node, you can choose yourself, get a 10% chance to fork again, perhaps, or just poison. I'm not sure how much fork we have. Let's see, 44. I think the poison is maybe better. I'm not sure. That's up to you. Okay, so the next thing that we're using is Rain of Arrows. Rain of Arrows is just there to buff us. And I'll go over that in a second. First off, we take Hunting Technique. It has a 40% chance to lay down a trap. But you're probably wondering, what are you using arrow shot for? I mean, rain of arrows for? Well, there's a ring in the game that allows you to make a aura where you have a chance to trigger rain of arrows every second, which is this ring right here. Fenrir's Barrage Shots is what it's called. So when you turn on this aura, you have a chance to trigger rain of arrows on nearby enemies. And why do we want that? First of all, we get this 40% chance to lay down a trap upon landing. That's great and all. But the note we're looking for is everything is awesome. This makes us able to get up to 50% cooldown reduction for essentially doing nothing, except for like having that aura on and then casually shooting rain of arrows constantly. So in the Great Forge, as an example, this buff will be at 100%, and it gives such a large amount of a cooldown recovery that it's just a necessity for the build if you want to increase your damage per second. So the line says, while delighted, whenever you cast Rain of Arrows, you gain a delightful range stack, granting you 2% cooldown reduction, and it stacks up to 25 times. So that's 50% cooldown, and it's kind of funny. It says when you cast Rain of Arrows, but even though it's an aura that casts it for you, it's still you casting it, apparently. So you can get that buff, which is great. You can do that on other builds if you want to. It's actually a very, very powerful mechanic right now. It's been in the game for a long time, but it's gotten stronger because I'm pretty sure they buffed this ring quite significantly in the big patch update. So yeah, that's for the skills. Let's go over the gear pieces. You've already seen the ring. Just get a bunch of life, movement speed, area size, area of effect, you name it. You can get way better gear than I could if you want to, except for maybe some pieces with pure modifiers. Those are pretty great, I'm pretty sure. So this ring makes us able to add +1 level in the ancestral legacy tree. I will go over that in a second. The gloves, just for a bit of life leech. You can get the one with cooldown recovery if you want to. I got a pure mod with some high crit. And the legendary for the shoulder is not necessary. I will say though, I have plans to play a character with Wandering Arrow in the future and see where I can push it to. Because apparently Wandering Arrow is a minion. And I'm looking very much forward to that because there's a lot of powerful minion modifiers in the game that I look forward to. But enough of that. This is the stat that I have. I mean, honestly, the Vitality helmet is just such a great helmet. I feel like that's just the best in slot if you just want a very normal character that doesn't invest, like, let's say, heavily into one defensive stat, like armor or evasion, elemental resistance. If you just want something simple, the max life is just the best option, in my opinion. I got very lucky with this amulet that I found on a previous character. So getting this much area size is great, just because we can increase our clear speeds that much more. Chest, we got another pure stat with armor penetration. We pretty much get almost all our penetration from the chest piece, which is great. And then the cape and the belt. effect is very powerful because you can pretty much get a 16% damage reduction from this. So the 16% damage dealt to you is staggered and dealt over 10 seconds instead of being dealt immediately. So that 16% damage taken over 10 seconds can get removed by Ancestral Strike damage as well. So it's pretty much like a 16% damage reduction, and you can scale that up to I think it's 22%. Yeah, 22% or 23, I'm not sure. So that's great. Okay, and then for attributes, we went all the way up in dexterity, and there's a few great reasons for that. First of all, we get a lot of attack speed, which we need to make our animation speed faster, so you like move on instantly. Like I think I can show you how much of a difference it makes. If I go all the way out of it, you can hear the sound, it's a bit slower now. And when you go up in it, it's just a bit faster. It feels great. And on top of that, there's a lot of great stats we get. First of all, we get projectile speed for arrow shot. That means it can hit things faster, and it can then rebound and hit them again to do even more damage and have a chance again to trigger traps, which is great. Next is also a bit of elite damage, which is also a massive multiplier and single target. And then we get some crit chance if there are no enemies in a 3-yard radius. This is usually not on at all, but it can be great sometimes. And the most important thing is probably, maybe not the most important, but one of the most important things is the pierce chance. And you get a bit more pierce here. So you get like, I think it's 21. Yeah, 21 pierce chance. But the last node makes you able to deal increased damage for each yard between you and the enemy. So if the enemy is 10 yards away, you suddenly deal 30% increased damage, which is a multiplicative modifier. And I think that's pretty much the best option you can have. And then Fury for the 10% crit chance. I usually take this on almost any build, unless you can get your crit capped in another way. But for an easy 10% crit chance, this is awesome. And then the last points is probably going into Savagery just for the raw damage modifiers. And a bit of Reaper damage multipliers. And now, the Ancestral Tree. We go with Air Conditioner for the great defense. When enemies are nearby, their attack speed pretty much gets cut in half. That means that animation speed, also the cooldown, I'm pretty sure. Because on enemies, they haven't changed the wording for enemies. So they pretty much have the legacy attack speed modifier pre-patch. So this affects both their animation speed and their cooldown, which is great. Next is Raw Boost. That's just for a bunch of damage. Exceptional accuracy, pierce and projectile speed, and some armor penetration. Very great. Next is for traveling. Elemental Sorcerer is just for traveling. Next is Lethal Force, crit chance and crit damage. Actually a pretty good modifier right here, as well as getting some Ancestral Strike chance, which makes us able to remove the staggered damage on us when we get damage. Very powerful. The next one is actually one of my favorite nodes in the game, just because of all the mods here is very powerful. First of all, you get Fork, you get Rebound, you get damage to elites, you get cooldown. What more do you ask for? It's great. It's such a powerful node right here. And then last but not least, we take Warlock's Ascendancy. And this is just for the area size, area effect, and some area damage reduction, which is also great and very powerful. And let's not forget the unrestricted one, which is another raw boost for a bunch more raw damage. And then last but not least, let's go over the character stats. As you can see right here, you can see my cooldown. This cooldown gets all the way up to, I'm pretty sure it's like 60% or maybe even more, 65 maybe, when you have all your Serenity stacks up and running. We have a bunch of attack speed, which is great for our animation speed. Crit chance is quite high as well, 63%. And with arrow shot having this node right here, breathe in, breathe out, you suddenly have 100% chance to crit, to make the chance of you proccing traps on enemies greater. Very powerful. We have a fair amount of elite damage. It could be higher, but this is all I could afford to get. Tenacity is 100%, and I forgot to mention earlier, which is great for the Primordial Malediction. So enemies have a 15% chance to stun you for the next 0.5 seconds, but you can completely ignore that malediction by having 100% tenacity. And I cannot recommend it enough because tenacity is just so good in this game. Like, it's just a powerhouse of a quality of life. Like, when you try it out and go back to a normal character, you cannot live without it. That's just what I'm gonna say. And then for the other stats right here, you can see my area size is 132 and my area effect is 76. These stats can get scaled way higher if you want to, but this is what I went with. Honestly, the area size is kind of great on my character, I would say. But yeah, that's pretty much for this character. I quite enjoyed it, and yeah, I might do something different in another time when, let's say the 200, not 200, I think it's 120 added legendaries get added to the game. I want to see what it has to offer on these builds that we're playing currently. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this far, and I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, because I'm doing a lot of build guides for Slormancer. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.